Fontaine has introduced a plethora of wonderfully powerful characters. Insane nuking magicians, judicial DPS overlords, meta-defining actresses, element-bending mafia bosses, and deadly skullcrackers. This region truly has been a fountain of powerhouses. Yet, that is not to say that all Fontaine releases were absolute hits. And Sigewinne's recent release has brought that to my attention more than ever. So I thought, hey, why don't we take a look at Fontaine's most disappointing character releases, look into why they're so lackluster in the meta, evaluate whether they have any uses in the current meta, and think about how Hoyoverse could make these characters better. Note that I'm not saying that these characters are bad, more so underwhelming as they didn't meet community standards. And if you like any of these characters, great, keep using him. I mean, hey, one of my favorites is in this list too. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. First, let's start with the obvious disappointing release, the one that's been on everyone's mind in recent times, Sigewinne. Man, there was potential here, but sadly she just ended up feeling so insignificant on the whole for quite a few reasons. First of all, Sigewinne is simply a second Kokomi, and I'd argue that Kokomi is honestly a better unit on the whole, which I've already covered in a recent video. But to recap quickly, Kokomi has more teams, Sigewinne is barely an increase over Kokomi and Mono Hydro, and Kokomi has more external buffing capabilities. But what if you skipped Kokomi? Well, if you skipped Kokomi consistently over the years, it is because you never really required her services. If you never needed Kokomi, then you'll never need Sigewinne either. Plus, Hydro is the best element in Genshin Impact, but she barely applies it, 1 to 2 times per skill at best. Her ability to buff skill-based pets simply isn't significant enough to pull her for, and her strange bond of life mechanics have no useful abilities at the moment. If you're going to make such a similar character to the same thing you made 2 years ago, then simply make them stronger. There was no need for her. No wonder they placed Sigewinne next to Furina in the same release patch as Clorinde. They knew that Sigewinne couldn't carry her own banner sales. Granted, she is a great Furina support, and Sigewinne's teams are not bad either. Do you remember what I said earlier? Just because the character was received as underwhelming does not make them garbage, but you do have to recognize how much more lackluster Sigewinne is compared to someone like Arlecchino who arrived only 1 patch ago. As for uses in the current meta, pretty nice in Mono Hydro in fact, Burst fits in comfortably during Yelan's burst downtime, and her constellations actually add a neat amount of value to Sigewinne, namely C2, which adds Hydro res reduction to your kit, which is super cool. She can also run a pretty cool taser team of Sigewinne, Furina, Fischl, and Kazuha, which is a really fun, neat little team. I mean, hey, combine 3 very powerful characters with a character who buffs up skill-based pets? No wonder that the team is pretty neat, and Kokomi, while she can drive taser comfortably as well, doesn't have the skill buff gimmick. As for how to make Sigewinne better, think about why Xian, Yan, and Baizhi are so good, despite being only healers. Xian Yan not only has a crap ton of heals, but she also has great sets to hold, enables a whole new playstyle for many characters, and buffs up the power of plunging. Baizhi provides weak shields as well, light Dendro application, can be a Nihida replacement, and 4-piece Deepwood holder, and can buff Dendro reactions, which is pretty neat. Sigewinne does have some small buffing in her kit, but I think to make her better, make that buffing more front and center. It would have also incentivized the idea of her being a premium Furina support even more. Increase how much she buffs and make it very nice and consistent to activate. Also, crank up her damage. Yeah, damage isn't everything, but without her signature, her damage is in the water. Ironic considering she's a Hydro. She has a burst that's supposed to be a quick 2.5 second nuke. Make that nuke more, well, nuclear. She's so signature reliant, and in that case, if they made her R1 damage her C0 R0 damage, they could then jack up her damage with R1. Also, make her burst a slight bit longer and allow her to trigger Yelan procs so she can at least have rotation flexibility as an option. I understand that you can currently slot her in perfectly during Yelan's downtime, but even so, it'd be nice to have more flexibility when planning rotations. I can't comment much on her weird Bond of Life passive or the fact that none of her best teams use source water droplets. For all I know, they may have future plans in regards to that, but perhaps they'll make some character in the future with a skill-based pet that works with Bond of Life or droplets. Just some food for thought, let me know what you think down below in the comments, and while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe. She is the cutting edge of B tier. The funny thing is that I think Chiori's honestly not that bad. I think my opinion of her is more positive than most people's. Why she feels lackluster is more community related, as we were all disappointed considering Chiori is simply not what we wanted her to be, which I'll touch on in just a moment. That, and how a certain someone is lacking a dedicated, well-synergizing support to boost up her damage. So, what did we all want Chiori to be? Simple? A Navia buffer? As of now, Navia has no dedicated Geo buffer that really tends to her specifically. Goro, while he can have some benefits for her, really isn't that well tuned to her, since Goro was made for more traditional Geo units. Navia broke these traditional def-scaling mono-Geo conventions, so she had to make do with an awkward, non-ideal second Geo synergy and circle impact. It would have been literally perfect, especially because Navia would have went from a really solid DPS to potentially one of the best in the game, with the correct kind of support. And the spot was right there to fill! Nobody was asking for a second Albedo, and it seriously doesn't help that Albedo is extremely mid, so why would anybody actually want another one of him? Because he has a nice jacket? Well, yeah. Chiori is the cutting edge of fashion. So, getting a construct-tied character that acted as a sub-DPS instead of a damage buffer, having anti-synergy with Navia's best teams at the time, while being best in slot for a character that virtually nobody played anymore? Yeah. Disappointing was an understatement. Now here's the kicker. Chiori is still the best in slot within Navia teams. She brought Ito team's performance up a solid amount and formed a neat double Geo core of Zhongli, who provided her with enough constructs to make her competent. And even with 0 constructs, she's still the highest damaging Geo partner option in Navia teams. But Zhongli is right there. Sure, Chiori's a lot better, but one is a lot more flexible than the other, and most people are far more likely to already own a Zhongli. It doesn't help that she's so anti-free-to-play. Terrible weapon options outside of her 5-star choice. Granted, Uraku is quite a good pick on many characters, but you shouldn't feel forced to pick up a signature for competence. It should be an add-on to an already complete kit experience. Not to mention how her C1 essentially unbricks Chiori and constructless teams. C1 R1 to function at base. Yikes, how deadly. Speaking of death, nah, just kidding, at least she's a highly performing character. Anyways, Chiori was a mediocre, slightly above average unit who did not meet the expectations of what any of us truly wanted. In terms of what she can do in the current meta, she's a godsend for Ito mains, power crept Albedo completely, and its C1R1 is a very good Navia teammate, but without even one of those things, she's demoted to being a solid enough premium upgrade. As for how to make Chiori better, dude, it's so simple. Remove her construct limitations, that's literally it. That, and make her less reliant on C1. Perhaps throw us a bone with an event weapon that becomes her new best 4-star. Man, then she'd truly be Albedo's successor. But no, seriously, make her better for free-to-plays and low spenders. We want to invest more into the main DPSs of our team, naturally. Not so much the hyper-specific buffer teammate. Also, make Chiori's A4 team-wide. 20% geo damage bonus for everyone would be a neat buff. In an ideal world, Chiori would be that buffer we're all looking for, but with the hand we've been dealt, simply removing constructs being a big deal would be enough. After all, Navia, Chiori, Furina, Xianyun is a team with lots of promise, and it's a shame that Chiori feels so limited, as if she's not at her full potential when you play her with Navia. Remember when I said one of my favorite characters is on this list? Yeah, we're at that stage now. Wriothesely, the absolute GOAT in terms of writing, story, and the fact that he's murdered 2 people. Also, he likes fishing. How epic. What's less epic is his kit. I can't blame the poor dude for being so underwhelming. He got sandwiched terribly between Noivy and Furina's release, so unfortunately bro got the break banner treatment, allowing people to save up for the next hype character. First off, my guy does less than 50% of the team's damage in his best team. Like, the team itself is pretty solid, but Furina and Xiangling's backs are broken from how hard they're carrying the synergy here. Not to mention how his C1 fixes his clunk tenfold and should have just been a part of his base kit. He really is the modern incarnation of Hu Tao, but at least Tao does her own respectable DPS numbers. The beast is also heavily Sig reliant, but that's all I'm gonna say on that, because to be honest, quite a lot of DPSs are. That's not just his fault. But as I said before, you shouldn't have to invest in an expensive signature weapon just to get a character performing at base level. Yikes. My dude also had to endure cryo syndrome, aka the fact that his element is literally never thrown a bone and is outclassed by all elements above it in terms of the meta right now. Kind of hard to fit him in places where he isn't outclassed. He does have pretty solid meta use cases. Once again, Rio isn't even garbage. He's quite alright, and Furina's release really did save him, but claiming that he wasn't underwhelming is a bit disingenuous considering how few people pulled for the dude back then. Comment down below with a wolf emoji if you're goated and pulled for Jailman, cause I think you're pretty cool. I want to reiterate that I like this character a lot. The only reason I don't have him is because I was saving for C6 Furina and refused to buckle. His use cases are Rio, Furina, Bennett, Xiangling, a very solid team, and Rio Freeze, which is also pretty neat. Not the strongest DPS around for sure, especially by insane Fontaine standards, but his service is still appreciated. As for how to make him better, putting his C1 within his base kit would fix him honestly. Why does his C1 fix him, I hear you ask? Big quality of life. His charged attack doesn't consume stamina anymore, and it does a buttload more damage. Plus, Rio can then actually keep up with his own HP drain. He can then play with healers while not having a brain aneurysm. By that, I mean you can use Rio's special charged attack after 5 normals without needing to be below 60% HP. Because if you go healerless at C0, Rio's charged attack doesn't keep up with his HP drain, so you'll fall below to 50%, which means no skill buff for you. You shouldn't have to pull an entire constellation in order to make a character feel playable. I'm sure we've all felt this frustration in the past of Hu Tao's C1. The reason we all overlooked that more easily was because she held her ground so well in terms of damage output. Rio needs it to feel competent at all, so fix that, amp up his damage numbers, and then we're pretty much good to go. I want to remind you all that I don't think these characters are unplayable garbage by any means. Flawed? Absolutely. Needing improvement? For sure. Do they still ultimately have places in the meta? Yeah, even if not very influential spots, they still have their places. I thought this video would be interesting to make, considering how everybody feels about Sigewinne. We've had so many incredible characters come out in the 4.x era, but these guys always felt like the oddballs when it came to Fontaine power scaling. Would be funny if the guy who power scaled Arlecchino power scaled Sigewinne though. The coughing baby becomes the hydrogen bomb. Hopefully this video was able to feed you some food for thought when it comes to Fontaine's most disappointing character releases. This has been Juice, signing out, and holy hell, I don't care what anyone says, I still think Rio is based as